Hi, I'm Representative Simon Cataldo, and I'm so excited to be joining you on the very first episode of The Whole Truth. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a new member sworn in January of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. I represent residents in the northern half of Acton, in addition to residents in parts of Concord, parts of Chelmsford, and the entire town of Carlisle, which is the 14th Middlesex District. On this show, we're going to be talking about local, statewide, and national issues that bear special relevance to you here in the town of Acton. We're going to be talking about issues, we're going to be bringing on guests, and I'm going to be soliciting your advice about what you want to hear on this show. We'll have sometimes one guest, sometimes multiple guests, and then sometimes, like I am now, we'll just be talking about some context around issues that are affecting all of us. In terms of who we bring on as guests, we have two very special guests that I'm excited for you to meet today. But in the future, I'm really going to want your input. You should be don't have any limitations about who you're asking me to bring on. You want to bring on Ben Affleck, Maura Healy, the senior class president at Acton Boxborough, Jason Tatum. Tell me who you want, and I'll try to get those folks onto the show. You can email me at simon.cataldo@mahouse.gov. That's my email address, simon.cataldo@mahouse.gov, to contact me about questions you want me to answer, guests you want me to have on the show, or topic areas that you want to be covered on The Whole Truth. But before we get going today, I thought that I'd spend just a minute to introduce myself. Many of you know me. I had the great pleasure of meeting many of you on the campaign trail, and then after I was elected and sworn in January, but some of you may not yet. I grew up in West Concord, grew up with my two younger sisters and my parents, Carol and Jim, right over the Concord line from the Stop and Shop in Acton. I went to the public schools in Concord from kindergarten until 12th grade, where I graduated from Concord Carlisle High School in 2004. I then went to college at a small school in Colorado called Colorado College, where I studied environmental science. I focused on chemistry and wrote my senior thesis on the thermodynamics of residential building energy. I wanted to be a chemistry teacher in an inner city environment. So I signed up for Teach for America and moved to Harlem, where I was hired at a large 6th through 12th grade public school to teach high school chemistry. Except that 4 days before school started, I was introduced by the principal at the school as the new 7th and 8th grade special education math teacher. And that's where I learned how to fight for things that I really believed in, and where I learned how to be a teacher. I ended up loving teaching special education, and one of the great blessings and gifts that I received while being a teacher was the opportunity to start Harlem's very first public middle school lacrosse team with my students. My students and I went to the concrete handball court beside school and started what would be an incredible journey for those children, for me and their families, and for many children after that. I ended up launching, after 3 years in Harlem, what's now Harlem Lacrosse, a national school-based nonprofit for at-risk youth. It still operates in Harlem and now the Bronx, as well as Boston, including public schools in East Boston, Dorchester, and Mattapan, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Los Angeles. That organization today has about 65 full-time employees nationwide. We serve about 1,300 students, and they've earned about $75 million in academic scholarships since we started the organization. I continue to serve as president of the board of that organization. After I was a teacher, I went to law school at the University of Virginia, clerked for a First Circuit Court of Appeals judge in the Federal U.S. Appeals Court. And the First Circuit is a court that oversees the New England region of the United States. And then I was drafted into what's called the Public Integrity section at the U.S. Department of Justice. It's a small section that was created after the Watergate scandal in the 70s to exclusively focus on prosecuting federal corruption offenses and federal election crimes. While I was there, I prosecuted and investigated a wide range of public corruption-related offenses, everything from former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio for criminal contempt in Arizona to a judge in Arkansas who was accused and later convicted of abusing defendants who became before his court, to the former chair of the Florida Democratic Party in a large-scale RICO and bribery allegation that did also result in a conviction. Now I live back in Concord, the town where I grew up with my wife and our 3 children, and I love being part of this area. I think it's such a gift to live in this part of the country, in this part of the Commonwealth. But like many of you, in 2020 and 2021, I was having a sense that we really needed to do more for our community and for our society. And so I, like the people that we're going to be talking to today, decided to run for public office and really to have my first political involvement of my life. When the seat opened up, our former state rep, Tammy Gouveia, decided she would run for lieutenant governor, which created an opening. And I jumped into the race and had a wonderful time. I spent about a year biking through Acton and the rest of the district and knocking on doors and listening to what people wanted to see from their government, what they liked, what concerned them, what they wanted to see change. And I was incredibly fortunate to have enough support to end up winning in the primary and then in the general election. And as I said, I was just recently sworn in on January 4th to be our state rep in the district. So today we're going to be talking about the Acton Boxborough School Committee. And we just had an election that I think was very unique in a number of ways. We're going to hear from 2 of our brand new school committee members in the regional school district. Before they come on and I have this opportunity to introduce them to you and for them to introduce themselves, I wanted to provide some context. The first has to do with turnout. So we have seen in Acton and the other towns in the district fairly strong turnout in statewide and federal elections, but not nearly as good turnout in local elections. So for example, the percentage turnout in 2023 in Acton for this recent town election, which included town offices, so select board, school committee, and similar positions, was 14%. In the 2022 state election, the turnout was 65%. In the 2020 election, which was a presidential election year, the turnout was 84%. So clearly we have people who are willing to vote, but they're not always as willing to vote on town elections, which is troublesome because these positions are really, really important. And in fact, I'd argue that they affect our everyday lives as much or more than some of the higher up positions. And Acton is not alone in those discrepancies. So in Carlisle, which just had a town election, which did have candidates but was not contested, they had a 9% turnout, but the 2022 state election, they had a 71% turnout. In the 2020 presidential election, they had a 92% turnout. There were similar figures in Concord as well. In fact, Concord had the exact same percentage turnout as Acton did in its most recent town election, a 69% turnout in the statewide election, and an 87% turnout in the presidential election. So why do we have low turnout in municipal elections? I think there are a few reasons that have been proposed, one of which is a lack of local media coverage. And I commend everybody in the town of Acton who has recently been working on getting a local paper. I was just talking to my friend Franny Osman yesterday, and she's making some great progress, and I know she has a lot of help in that regard. So for those of you who are working on that, go you and keep up the good work. There is a lot of data showing that turnout in all elections, including local elections, is correlated with good, strong local news sources. The second is that a lot of races go uncontested, and that's one of the reasons we're here today, because Acton really bucked the trend and had a very competitive and also really positive campaign with some great and very well qualified candidates for multiple positions. And then one final reason is that municipal elections also happen in odd numbered years. So our local candidates are not on the same ballot frequently as these other statewide and federal elections. And so you really have to want to vote in your local election. You're not just going because you're voting for some other position. Finally, before we bring on our guests, I wanted to share with you some proposals in the state legislature that are being worked on now to try to boost the number of candidates and turnout. One is an initiative that's led by my colleague Kate Lipper-Garabedian of Melrose in the House, which is to allow campaign funds to be used on childcare costs for candidates with children. This is a major deterrent for middle-class people with children to run, because I can tell you, having just been through a campaign with multiple small children who needed childcare, that is one of the hardest things is figuring out how you're going to go to all of these events, many of which do not occur during school hours when you don't have childcare. I was fortunate to have an incredible partner who really stepped up and helped me and supported me through that year. And also I brought my kids, as many of you saw, to a lot of campaign and community events. But still, this is a change that I think is really called for. And I should note that effort is also being led by my colleague Dan Hunt, who's a co-filer on that. There has also been an effort in multiple towns in the district to lower the voting age in municipal elections to 16. This is something I support, and the reason that I support it is that I talk to 14 and 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds, and I see how informed they are on the issues and how much they care. And I think we really ought to start building that muscle memory of voting while our kids are here in our communities before they go off to work or to study somewhere else. They should get used to voting, get accustomed to voting right here in our own communities, where they know that the decisions made by their local officials will affect them. So with that, I am so excited to invite on our guests. We'll take a short break and we'll come back to you with our guests. We are back with the first two guests ever on The Whole Truth. I am so glad to be here today with Tori Campbell and Yanxin Schmidt. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and congratulations on your victory in this recent school committee election. So for those who don't know, you were just elected. You are two of the three candidates and now school committee members who have just been elected. The other one is Leela Ramachandran, who wasn't able to come on today, but who I'm looking forward to having on the show too. And you were also running alongside a select board election in addition to other local offices. And Alyssa Nickel is a new select board member who I'm also looking forward to having on sometime soon. So we're going to talk about the campaign a little bit. We're going to talk about what it was like to run for office. You two ran in a really unique election in a lot of really good ways. But before that, I would love for you to introduce yourselves. You have such interesting and unique backgrounds. So Tori, if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Tori. My family moved to Acton in 2018. This was after my husband and I had transitioned out of 20 years in the Army. So we have currently a senior just about to graduate, which is really exciting.
Congrats.
And we have a sophomore as well at the high school. But when they came in, they were at McCarthytown and R.J. Gray. And really what drew us here was, one, I was going to grad school, and so we needed to find a place where I could take the train in, but my family could still have good access to the outdoors. And as we were thinking about what else do we want for our kids, we were worried about, can we find a place that has enough diversity that we feel like they will hear lots of different voices in their childhood experience. And here we are sitting at the subway at Kelly's Corner, and we're watching kids coming out of school walking together, and suddenly we just looked at each other and we're like, we don't need to worry about this. This is going to be a great place for our kids. And so here we are. And
here you are.
Here I am, yes.
Thank you so much, Tori. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Yanxin Schmidt. Happy to be here today. My family and I moved here to Acton in 2018. I'm originally came from China, so I'm an immigrant, and I'm raising two multiracial boys with my husband in Acton. When we moved here in 2018, I took my children and we started volunteer for Meals on Wheels. That's how I got to know Acton and its residents. I've been a parent volunteer in the schools since the children started school here. Right now I am a soccer coach. I am a vice president with Boston Area Youth Soccer. I am a writer and a translator. And I guess I just got one more addition onto all my titles. I'm a newly elected school committee member.
Yes, and congratulations. So, we're living in this time when I think, for lack of a better word, it's a little bit scary to run for office and to put yourself out there. I mean, neither of you have really interesting professional and life experiences, but neither of you have experiences, as I didn't either, that were very, very much in the public sphere. Mm-hmm. So tell me about this. Tell me about why you wanted to do this and what that decision-making process was like. Tori, if you want to start.
I was going to say rock, paper, scissors. Nope. So I guess I've always felt like I should be doing things for the good of the community, the good of the world. I've always kind of been driven. It's kind of what sent me into West Point, because I just sensed that the people who were there, and you know this as well because you've gotten to live at West Point too, the people who were there had this shared idea that we should make the world a better place. And so when I realized that I had some time, and I've got a couple of graduate degrees in education now, which my family ribs me about all the time. And my husband's like, hey, there are a couple of seats. You should run for school committee. That seems like a good use of your time. I was like, yeah, that probably makes sense. And I don't think I thought through any of the whole process. Like, I had no idea what I was getting into. And I'm lucky that I was surrounded by a bunch of really great people. And so it wasn't as scary a thing as it could be. As for the not being a public figure, yes and no. So being an officer in the military, and certainly being in command or being in key positions, I've had to stand up in front of people, and you realize that you are very vulnerable in that way. People are absolutely going to talk about you if you are the commander, because who else are they going to talk about, right? You're the person in charge. That's where the buck stops. So I think from that perspective, it was okay. But yeah, I was just really glad that I discovered everybody else running was willing to actually have a positive conversation and make it a good experience where we all wanted the best for Acton, instead of feeling like we were all attacking each other personally. And I think a lot of times, as you alluded to, that's something you have to think about.
So my story is perhaps unique in a way. Many people have approached me while I was co-chairing AB School's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Family Advisory Group. The question then was that, don't you want to see all the work you guys did come to life in the schools and benefiting all the students? And I thought about it for a long time. I think I told everybody no for about a whole year. Until it was actually in the spring this year during Chinese New Year. I was having dinner with a friend's family, and his wife actually said in a passing comment that we were just talking about the schools, the community, the upcoming election, and she was just making a very innocent comment saying that, it was very difficult for my husband back then when he was a school committee member, because he took upon himself to learn. So he actually drove around towns to listen, attend the school committee meetings so that he can do better here in Acton. And as we parted from that restaurant, and I look at them and thought, here are my friends who love this town so much and they gave so much to this town. It's time for a new generation to come up and carry on. So, and I pulled the paper next day.
Well, I'm so glad that you did and that you did, Tori. You know, it's interesting. I think all three of us have had this experience of being in a very competitive election that was also a very positive election, which is what you want, which is what it should be. So let's talk about that and your experiences as part of that, because you know one of these challenges that I listed in the opening is how many of these elections are uncontested, and then here we were in Acton Boxborough, and there were a lot of candidates, and not just a lot of candidates, but a lot of really good candidates who you'd had a network, and they had support, and they had ideas, and they had a background in areas that were very relevant to the job that they were applying for. So what was that like? Tell the viewers a little bit, in case they weren't following the election, how many candidates, and just tell us about what that was like.
I can go first.
Go for it.
Sure. So there were 6 candidates running for the school committee, and I believe there were 3 candidates running for the the selects board.
In 3 open spots for the school committee, right? So
Correct.
6 candidates, 3 spots, and all 6 were running active campaigns, right? It wasn't just like they were throwing their name on the ballot. They were really going out to the people and asking for their votes.
Yeah.
And so what was the interaction like between the candidates?
I actually don't remember how do we get the coffee thing going.
So
Do you
I
remember?
think a bunch of us started attending school committee meetings.
That's right.
That was where we met each other. Was
Yeah.
in the parking lot, right? And we just started exchanging contact information, and that to me was kind of magical, because some of the first ideating about what does this mean, what are we thinking about, what are the issues that are in front of us, occurred between the candidates as we were talking and comparing notes. And yeah, there's a group of us that had coffee a couple of different times, all of us knowing that all of us couldn't be elected, right? And so the fact that we could actually have those conversations and hear each other's experiences, that was just a starter of beginning to understand. And I think that was important to me, because every single one of us came to this process because there was something we really cared about. And so you start to understand not just what's important to you, but what are some of the other issues that are out there.
Right. And I know a few of the candidates for other volunteer projects. And I was introduced to a few new candidates through coffee chats. And I just felt, after, COVID and everything on virtually, everything on Zoom, you get to see a person and see the whole person, have a really candid conversation. That was something very, very surprising at the same time. Like, I was really grateful for that opportunity, those opportunities actually. And I do want to note that campaign is hard. So throughout the journey, any time that if one of us feel kind of like, I'm having a really hard time, there will always be a candidate who pick up the phone and just call and say, are you doing okay? We're in this together. The collegial spirit was there from the start.
Yeah, it was a really supportive group.
It was very important to all of us to uphold that.
Yeah.
Do you think that having those relationships and having it be so competitive, in the sense that there were a lot of candidates who were really trying, changed your preparedness on the day one of the job?
I'm not sure that it changed my preparedness on day one, but it made me better articulate to myself why I was running and what I thought I brought to the table.
When you mean day one on the job, do you mean like the first day for the school committee meetings?
Yes.
Yes, because during the campaign, I've heard, since we have coffee chats, I've heard everybody's opinion, perspective, experiences. I also know on the first day that I will always have them. They will always be there. We will always be able to talk to each other and hear different opinions and think about it.
That's so great to hear. I certainly felt that the process of a competitive campaign, and there were two other very qualified candidates in my primary, I felt that I was learning more because I had to engage with them and engage in issues that they cared about. And that I knew a lot more going into the job because of that competitive nature of the process. So I just think it's a reason for there to be more candidates. When I hear you talk about this experience of having multiple seats and more candidates than seats, I think about ranked choice voting. One of the main arguments for ranked choice voting is it actually becomes, from a strategic standpoint, more beneficial to be collegial with the other candidates than not.
Interesting.
Because if you're somebody's number one choice, then you want to be their number two choice, right? So you don't want to be on her bad side,
right?
And you don't want to be criticizing her because if Yanxin is my favorite, then you want to be seen as being friends, and sharing interests and sharing commonalities and objectives with that person. And so I think that's one way that we could start to change the tenor of our campaigns. Now, ranked choice voting has been an issue at town meeting in Acton. It was in Concord as well, and it's one thing that requires the state legislature's approval via a home rule petition. But I know that there are obviously conversations happening about that in our communities now. I want to ask you about any advice that you might have for people who are running.
It's very short. Go for it and ask for help.
Yeah. And I think also don't feel like just because everybody else is doing things a certain way, you have to do it that way too. I think it's important to be yourself and also to be content with what the voters decide.
That's wonderful advice. And just to bring it home to one thing you said is run. That's the advice that I give to people, is to run. And the rest of it kind of falls into place, but you have to do that first. Thank you so much. I am just so gratified that you came on the show, that you're the first guests on this show. For everybody who is watching, this was Tori Campbell and Yanxin Schmidt, two of the three new school committees on the school committee members in the Acton Boxborough Regional School Committee. The takeaway from today is run for office. I hope you'll consider doing that the next time the opportunity comes up. My name is Representative Simon Cataldo. I'm the state rep in the 14th Middlesex District. If you have ideas for the show, questions you want me to answer on the show, guests you want me to bring in, please email me at simon.cataldo@mahouse.gov. You can also visit my constituent website, repcataldo.com. You can sign up for my periodic newsletter, and you can follow frequent updates on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, this is The Whole Truth. Thank you for joining, and have a wonderful day.